When my wife told me that she needed another man in bed, and specifically a younger one, I felt like the ground had been pulled out from beneath me. We had been together for years, and despite the usual ups and downs, I never saw this coming. The idea that our relationship, the one I had believed to be strong, now required the presence of someone else, someone younger, more energetic, perhaps, left me feeling hollow. Her words echoed in my mind, "Jack, I think we need to spice things up. I need someone young, someone different." The casualness with which she said it was almost as jarring as the request itself. She wasn't angry, or bitter, there was no fight leading up to this. She spoke like it was a simple fact, like asking to rearrange the furniture, rather than asking for another man in our bed. I tried to hide my shock, but I could feel the tension tightening in my chest. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't flinch. "Look, we've been together a long time. You know I love you. But they've become routine, don't you think?" She twirled her hair between her fingers, not making eye contact, as if she was rehearsing a speech she had prepared long before. "Routine? Sure, we had our habits, but wasn't that part of life, of growing old together?" I didn't even know how to respond, so I just sat there, waiting for her to elaborate. "I've been thinking about this for a while, Jack. I need someone who can give me that spark. I'm not talking about leaving you or anything like that. I'm just saying maybe we should try something new, like bringing someone else into the bedroom. A young man." Her words felt like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to get angry, but all I could feel was a deep, hollow sadness. Was I not enough anymore? How long had she been thinking about this? Had she already found someone, or was this just an idea she was toying with? "Why?" I finally managed to ask, my voice hoarse. "Why do you feel like you need this?" She sighed, finally looking at me. "It's not that you've done anything wrong. But I just want something different. We've had a good run, but I need to feel that excitement again. You understand, don't you?" No, I didn't understand. I didn't understand how after all these years, she could look at me and say she needed someone else to make her feel alive again. I didn't understand how she could think that adding another man to our bed would somehow fix whatever was missing. She continued talking, trying to explain herself, but her words felt distant, like they were coming from someone I didn't know. The woman I had spent so many years with, the woman who had once looked at me like I was everything she ever wanted, was now asking for something I couldn't give her. Or worse, something I wouldn't give her. I wanted to tell her no, to shut down the conversation, but I was frozen. Part of me wanted to pretend this wasn't happening, that she hadn't just suggested this. But another part of me, the part that was scared, wondered if refusing would only push her further away. What if she found someone on her own anyway? The idea of her sneaking around behind my back with a younger man, enjoying the thrill that I apparently couldn't provide anymore, filled me with a mix of anger and despair. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. She reached out, placing her hand on mine. "Just think about it, Jack. Please. I'm not trying to hurt you. I just need this." I pulled my hand away, standing up from the table. "I need some air," I said, walking toward the door. "Jack, please. Don't be mad." Her voice was soft, pleading, but I couldn't stay there, couldn't look at her without feeling like I was about to break. I stepped outside, the cool air hitting my face as I stood on the porch, staring out at nothing. My mind raced with thoughts, each one worse than the last. What was I supposed to do now? How was I supposed to look at her, sleep beside her, knowing she wanted someone else? I had no answers. Only the gnawing feeling that something between us had been irrevocably broken. And I didn't know if it could ever be fixed. As I stood there on the porch, the silence of the evening weighing heavily on me, my thoughts were spinning out of control. My wife's words still echoed in my head, her casual suggestion that we bring another man into our bed. But it wasn't just any man, it was someone specific. I hadn't been ready for what she said next. In fact, it made everything feel worse. What about Derek? She had asked earlier, her tone as nonchalant as if she were suggesting a new restaurant for dinner. Derek? Derek, my friend? The same Derek who was 10 years younger, single, and always the life of the party? My mind froze at the thought. Of all the possible names she could have thrown out, she chose him. I had known Derek for years. We met at work, hit it off quickly, and he'd been there through thick and thin. He was the kind of guy who was always up for a beer after a long day and never seemed to settle down with anyone, always enjoying his freedom. Now, she was suggesting that he be the one to, spice things up between us. I felt my stomach twist in knots. Why Derek? I had asked, my voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. Well, he's your friend, and he's single, she replied, as if the explanation were simple and logical. We both know him, and he's fun. It wouldn't be awkward like with a stranger. Not awkward? I repeated, stunned by her rationale. How do you think I'm supposed to look him in the eye after something like that? He's my friend, for God's sake. She shrugged, clearly not understanding the gravity of what she was suggesting. I just think it would be less complicated. He's younger, he's got that energy, and he likes us, Jack. He'd be into it. You could talk to him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was this really happening? Was she really expecting me to approach Derek, my friend, about this? It was insane. The very thought of sitting down with him, explaining that my wife wanted him to participate, made me feel sick to my stomach. Derek wasn't just some random guy, he was part of my life, someone I trusted. How could she think this was a good idea? Was this really how she saw our relationship now? That the only way forward was to involve a third person, and not just any third person, but Derek? I don't think you realize what you're asking, I finally said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rage boiling inside me. She looked at me, her expression softening, as if she genuinely didn't understand why this was such a big deal. Jack, it's not like I want to replace you. I think it could be fun. I want to feel that thrill again, and I thought maybe Derek would be the right fit. It could even bring us closer, you know? Closer? How could something like this possibly bring us closer? My wife was suggesting that my friend, someone I shared drinks with, confided in, should be the one to fulfill her desires because I wasn't enough anymore. The idea of it tore me apart inside, but I didn't have the words to explain that to her, at least not in a way that she would understand. I need time to think, I muttered, stepping away from the conversation. I didn't want to hear any more, couldn't bear to listen to her try to justify why this was somehow okay. As I walked down the street, the air cool against my skin, I couldn't help but wonder how we had gotten here. How had we gone from being a couple who shared everything, who built a life together, to this? As I walked down the street, trying to put some distance between myself and the insanity I'd just stepped out of, my mind raced in a million directions. I kept hearing her voice, calm, composed, like she hadn't just dropped a bomb on our lives. Worse, like she expected me to go along with it. The idea that I would bring Derek into our marriage, that I'd even entertain such a thing, felt like a betrayal of everything we'd built together. But I wasn't gone for long before she came after me. Jack! I heard her call from behind. Her footsteps quickened as she caught up to me. Don't walk away from me. We need to talk about this. I stopped, not because I wanted to, but because I felt like if I kept walking, I'd never turn back. I couldn't run away from this, not from her. Not after everything. But facing her right now? It felt like staring into the heart of something I didn't even recognize anymore. She came up beside me, her breath slightly ragged from hurrying after me. We need to figure this out, Jack. You're acting like I'm asking for something unreasonable. I turned to her, the words caught in my throat. Unreasonable? This was beyond unreasonable. But before I could say anything, she pressed on, her voice firm and unwavering. You're blowing this way out of proportion, she continued, crossing her arms like she was annoyed with me. I'm telling you what I need, and you're just shutting me down like I'm some kind of crazy person. That's because what you're asking is insane, I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. You want to bring my friend, Derek, of all people, into our bed. How am I supposed to be okay with that? You could try, she snapped, her eyes flashing with irritation. You could at least try to understand where I'm coming from instead of just running off like a coward. This isn't just about you, Jack. I need this. The way she said it, I need this asterisk, like it was a demand, not a conversation, made my blood boil. Was this what it had come to? My wife standing here, telling me that if I didn't give her what she wanted, she'd find a way to take it herself? I could feel my hands shaking at my sides, the frustration building inside me. I couldn't believe she was treating this like it was just another decision we had to make together, like redecorating the house or deciding where to go on vacation. You're being selfish, she continued, stepping closer to me, her voice lowering but still harsh. You think this is easy for me? You think I enjoy asking for this? I'm trying to save our marriage, Jack. But you're acting like a child. I stared at her, completely stunned. Selfish? Was she really calling me selfish? How is this saving anything? I shot back, trying to keep my voice steady. You think throwing Derek into our bed is going to make things better? How is that supposed to fix whatever's broken between us? Because it'll bring something new, she yelled, throwing her hands up in exasperation. I don't want to feel like this anymore, trapped, bored. I want to feel alive again, and if you can't do that, then I'm finding a way to make it happen. You should be happy I'm coming to you with this, that I'm giving you the chance to make this work. I couldn't believe my ears. The arrogance, the sheer entitlement in her voice, made my head spin. She wasn't asking me for permission, she was telling me what was going to happen, and I had no say in it. Jack, she said, her tone softening a little, though there was still a hard edge to it, I'm not asking for a divorce. I'm not asking to leave you. But I need something more than this, more than what we've had lately. And if you won't give it to me, I'm going to find it somewhere else. That threat, subtle as it was, hit me like a slap to the face. Are you saying this is an ultimatum? I asked, my voice low. If I don't go along with this, what? You'll cheat on me? Is that what you're saying? She looked away, her jaw tight. She didn't answer, but her silence told me everything I needed to know. You're unbelievable, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe you're standing here, acting like this is something I'm just supposed to go along with. I'm doing this for us, Jack, she said, her voice hard again, as if she was the one being wronged. You need to grow up and stop being so close-minded. This is what I need, and if you care about me, if you care about saving this marriage, then you'll stop acting like a prude and make it work. Make it work. She kept saying that, like this was just another bump in the road, another compromise we had to make. But I wasn't going to compromise on this. Not on this. And if I don't? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, though I already knew the answer. She didn't flinch. Then I'll talk to Derek myself. The coldness of her words hit me like a brick to the chest. She wasn't bluffing. She was dead serious. She was prepared to drag Derek into this, with or without me. I could see it in her eyes, there was no guilt, no hesitation, just a stubborn determination to get what she wanted. And if I wasn't willing to give it to her, then she'd find a way to get it on her own terms. I took a step back, shaking my head. I can't believe this. You've really thought this through, haven't you? I have, she replied, crossing her arms again. I've given you the chance to be part of it, Jack. But if you're not interested, then fine. I'll handle it. Handle it. Like it was just business, like our marriage wasn't crumbling right before my eyes. I didn't know what else to say. There was nothing left to say. She had made up her mind, and no amount of reasoning or pleading was going to change that. All I could do now was walk away. I stood there, staring at her, feeling like I was on the edge of a cliff, with nowhere to go but down. She wasn't going to back off. She wasn't going to drop it, and I knew if I kept fighting, the next step would be losing her. I didn't want that. God help me, I didn't want to lose her, no matter how much this hurt. I wasn't ready to watch her walk out of my life and leave me standing there, shattered. I still loved her, despite everything she was saying, despite this awful situation she was dragging me into. And that's why, after a long silence, I finally said the words I never thought would come out of my mouth. Okay. Her eyes flickered with surprise for a moment. Maybe she hadn't expected me to agree, but I could tell by the way she immediately straightened her posture that she was relieved. She had gotten what she wanted. Okay, I repeated, my voice rough, the weight of that word crushing me. If this is what you need, if this is what's going to keep us together, fine. She let out a breath, her shoulders relaxing. Thank you, Jack. I know this isn't easy for you, but I promise it's going to be good for us. I just stood there, staring at her, feeling the jealousy and bitterness already festering inside me. Good for us. How could she think this was going to be good for us? But what choice did I have? I wasn't going to lose her, not after all these years. Not like this. Even though the thought of Derek, my friend, in bed with her made my stomach turn, I couldn't bring myself to say no. She was my wife, and if this was what she needed, I would somehow find a way to deal with it. But that didn't mean I wasn't angry. Or jealous. Hell, I was more jealous than I'd ever been in my entire life. Just the thought of her and Derek together, touching, laughing, doing things that used to be our things, it made my blood boil. How was I supposed to handle that? How was I supposed to sit there, pretending everything was fine, when all I could picture was Derek with his hands on my wife? I wasn't even sure I could go through with it. How the hell were the three of us supposed to make love in the same bed? I could barely wrap my head around the idea, let alone picture it actually happening. But I couldn't let her see that. I couldn't let her see how much this was destroying me, how much I hated the thought of sharing her with someone else, especially Derek. I don't even know how this is supposed to work, I muttered, half to myself. She stepped closer, reaching out to touch my arm, but I flinched away, not wanting to feel her touch right now. She frowned, but didn't push it. We'll take it slow, she said softly. I'm not expecting us to dive into this head first. We'll talk to Derek, see how he feels. And if we decide to go through with it, we'll go at a pace that feels comfortable for everyone. Comfortable? There was nothing comfortable about this. Nothing. I don't know how I'm supposed to face him, I admitted, running a hand through my hair in frustration. He's my friend, Sarah. How am I supposed to look him in the eye after this? She hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. Derek's not the kind of guy to make things awkward. He's open-minded. He'll understand. We'll set boundaries, and it'll be fine. I wanted to laugh, bitter, hollow laughter. Boundaries? What kind of boundaries did you set and you were inviting another man into your marriage, into your bed? How could there be any boundaries when the very act itself was already crossing every line I'd ever imagined? I couldn't even begin to picture it. The three of us in the same room, in the same bed. I didn't want to imagine how it would happen, how it would start, who would make the first move. Just the thought of Derek touching her, kissing her, made my insides churn with rage and jealousy. And yet, here I was, agreeing to it because I couldn't stand the thought of her leaving me for good. She must have sensed my hesitation, because she stepped closer again, this time her hand resting on my shoulder. Jack, she said softly, you're doing this for us. I know it's hard, but we'll be okay. You'll see. This isn't about replacing you. It's just about adding something new. Something exciting. I closed my eyes, trying to calm the storm inside me. I wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that she knew what she was doing, that this wouldn't tear us apart. But deep down, I knew things would never be the same. I wasn't sure if I could ever look at her the same way after this. Let me talk to Derek, she said, her voice gentle. I'll explain everything, and we'll figure it out from there. You don't have to do anything yet. I nodded, barely able to get the words out. Yeah. Fine. She kissed me softly on the cheek, as if that would somehow make things better, and then she turned and walked back into the house, leaving me standing there, alone in the dark, wondering what the hell I had just agreed to. The days that followed were a blur of anxious thoughts and restless nights. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except what was coming. Every time I saw Derek, I felt sick. I didn't know if Sarah had talked to him yet, or if he had any idea what was about to happen. Part of me wanted to confront him, to tell him this was a terrible idea, but the other part of me was too ashamed to say anything. How could I face him knowing what was being planned? The jealousy gnawed at me constantly. I could hardly look at Sarah without picturing her with Derek, and it was eating me alive. How was I supposed to share my wife with another man? How could she ask me to do this, knowing how much it would hurt me? But every time I thought about confronting her, I reminded myself of what was at stake. I couldn't lose her. Not now. Not after everything. Finally, one evening, she came to me and told me that she had talked to Derek. He's open to it, she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He understands, Jack. He's not going to make it weird. We'll just take things slow, like I said. I nodded, feeling the jealousy burn in my chest like a fire I couldn't put out. This was happening. Whether I liked it or not, this was going to happen. And I had no idea how I was going to survive it. The days that followed felt like I was living in a surreal nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every time I saw Sarah, the weight of what was coming pressed down on me, heavier than before. Even the simplest moments, sitting at the kitchen table, watching her sip her coffee, or lying in bed next to her at night, felt tainted. My mind was consumed with the thought of him. Of Derek. My friend. The man who was about to step into my marriage, into my bed, and I was expected to just stand by and watch. Sarah was calm about it all, even excited. She didn't seem to sense the storm raging inside me, or maybe she just didn't care. She talked about it like it was a normal thing couples did to keep their relationship fresh. But there was nothing normal about this. Nothing about the way I felt every time she mentioned Derek's name, how it made my stomach twist and my fists clench. I talked to Derek again, she said one night after dinner, her voice casual as she cleaned up the dishes. He's really understanding about all of this, Jack. He's not going to push anything. I nodded, barely hearing her. I didn't want to know the details. I didn't want to hear how understanding he was, how perfect he was for what she wanted. It only made me angrier, more jealous. And the worst part was, I couldn't even tell her. I couldn't let her see how much this was killing me inside, because I was terrified that if I pushed back, if I showed even a hint of hesitation, she'd take it as a sign that I wasn't willing to do what it took to keep her. But I was jealous. God, was I jealous? The idea of Derek with Sarah, it haunted me every second of the day. I pictured them together, laughing, touching, him giving her whatever it was she thought I couldn't anymore. I hated him for it, even though deep down I knew it wasn't his fault. He was just Derek. He didn't ask for this either. But that didn't matter. It was happening, and soon, I would have to face it. The night came faster than I expected. Sarah had planned everything. She told me she wanted it to feel comfortable, natural. She assured me there would be no pressure, that we'd only do what felt right for everyone. But nothing about this felt right. The whole situation was twisted, wrong, and yet there I was, standing in our bedroom, waiting for Derek to show up. Waiting for my friend to walk through the door and join us in something I could barely comprehend. I stared at the bed, the sheets perfectly made, and felt the bile rise in my throat. How was this supposed to work? How was I supposed to watch another man touch my wife? My mind kept racing, bouncing between anger, jealousy, and a sick kind of dread that made my skin crawl. Sarah was getting ready in the bathroom, humming to herself like it was any other night. She had put on the perfume she only wore on special occasions, the one that used to drive me crazy. But tonight, it only made me feel worse. I could smell it from across the room, and it reminded me of how much she had changed, how far we had drifted from the life we used to have. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the house, and my heart stopped. He was here. Sarah emerged from the bathroom, looking radiant, like she was about to go on a date. Her hair was done up, her makeup perfect. She smiled at me, that same smile that used to be just for me, and I felt a surge of bitterness rise up in my chest. "Can you get the door?" she asked softly, her voice calm, as if she had no idea what was going on inside me. "I'll be up here, getting everything ready." Getting everything ready. Those words hung in the air like a dark cloud. I nodded, my throat dry, and headed downstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. I wasn't sure I could do this. I wasn't sure I could face Derek, knowing what was about to happen, knowing what Sarah had asked of me. But I couldn't turn back now. When I opened the door, there he was, Derek, standing there with his easy smile, looking every bit like the friend I had known for years. He was casual, relaxed, like this was just another Friday night hangout. But I knew what was coming. I knew what he was here for. "Hey, man," he said, stepping inside. "You good?" I wanted to laugh. "Good? How could I be good?" I forced a smile, nodding stiffly. "Yeah. Fine." Derek gave me a curious look, like he could sense something was off, but he didn't push it. Instead, he glanced up the stairs toward the bedroom, his expression unreadable. "So? Sarah's up there?" "Yeah," I muttered, my mouth dry. "She's waiting." He nodded slowly, then looked back at me. "Look, Jack. I know this is weird. And if you're not okay with it, man, just say the word. I don't want to mess anything up between you two." His words stung, even though I knew he meant them. It wasn't Derek's fault. He was just doing what Sarah had asked. But I couldn't help the wave of jealousy that crashed over me. He was going to be with my wife. He was going to touch her, hold her, do God knows what with her, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice barely above a whisper. "Let's just go upstairs." I turned and headed back up the stairs, not waiting to see if Derek was following. I didn't want to see the look on his face, didn't want to acknowledge the reality of what was about to happen. When we entered the bedroom, Sarah was sitting on the edge of the bed, her eyes lighting up when she saw Derek. She stood up, crossing the room to greet him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. And that simple touch, the way she looked at him, the way she smiled, cut deeper than anything else. "Thanks for coming," she said softly, her voice warm. "Of course," Derek replied, his tone easy, but I could tell he was trying to gauge how to act. I stood there, frozen, watching them interact, my mind spinning. How was this happening? How had I let it get this far? The jealousy roared inside me, louder than ever, as I watched my wife flirt with my friend right in front of me. And then she turned to me, her expression soft, like she was trying to reassure me. "Jack," she said, her voice gentle, "are you okay with this?" No. No, I wasn't okay with it. I wasn't okay with any of this. But what was I supposed to say? If I backed out now, if I told her I couldn't go through with it, I knew what would happen. She'd go to Derek anyway. With or without me. She had made that clear. So I nodded, even though it felt like my heart was being torn in two. "Yeah," I muttered, my voice barely audible. "I'm okay." But I wasn't. And I didn't know how I ever would be. The next hour felt like a slow-motion car crash. I couldn't look away, couldn't stop what was happening, even though every fiber of my being screamed at me to put an end to it. Sarah and Derek started off slow, just talking, laughing, trying to make it feel normal. But nothing about it felt normal to me. I could see the way she looked at him, the way her hand would linger on his arm, the way she leaned in closer to him as the conversation went on. And then, at some point, the talking stopped. Sarah glanced at me, almost like she was asking for permission, but I didn't say anything. I just sat there, watching as she kissed him. I sat there, on the edge of the bed, watching as Sarah leaned in closer to Derek, her lips meeting his. My heart pounded in my chest, and for a moment, I thought I was going to be sick. The jealousy surged inside me, sharp and painful. I wanted to yell, to stop this, but the words caught in my throat. I was paralyzed, caught between the anger that had been building up inside me for days and something else, a darker, more complicated feeling I couldn't quite identify. Her hand slid up Derek's arm, and I saw the way he responded, the way his body shifted toward her. And suddenly, without warning, something inside me shifted too. The jealousy that had been burning in my chest began to blur into something else. Something I hadn't expected. Excitement. I wasn't sure how it happened, or when exactly it hit me, but as I watched Sarah kiss Derek, slowly, tenderly, I felt a strange rush of adrenaline. My heart was still racing, but not just with anger. There was something undeniably electric in the air, something that made my skin tingle and my pulse quicken in a way I hadn't felt in years. I didn't understand it, didn't know why this feeling was taking over, but I couldn't deny it. The jealousy was still there, simmering in the background, but it was being overshadowed by a growing sense of intrigue. Watching them together, Sarah, my wife, and Derek, my friend, wasn't just painful anymore. It was thrilling. Maybe it was because I had been so consumed by fear and anger that the rush of excitement felt like a release, a break from the tension that had been building inside me for days. Or maybe it was something deeper, something I hadn't realized about myself until now. All I knew was that, for the first time since this whole thing started, I didn't want to run. I wanted to join them. Sarah's hand trailed up Derek's chest, and she glanced back at me, her eyes searching mine. There was no hesitation in her gaze, no guilt, no shame. She was inviting me in, welcoming me into this new, strange reality we were creating together. And for reasons I couldn't fully explain, I felt drawn to it. Before I could think twice, I stood up from the edge of the bed and moved closer to them. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't been sure I would take that step, but she smiled, a warm, knowing smile that made my pulse race even faster. She reached out for my hand, pulling me in between them, and suddenly, the distance between us, between me and Derek, between me and Sarah, disappeared. We were all in this together now. Sarah kissed Derek again, but this time, she kept her hand on me, her fingers lightly brushing my arm as she moved. It was surreal, watching her, feeling her close to me while she kissed someone else, but it wasn't as painful as I thought it would be. In fact, the more I let myself get swept up in the moment, the less I thought about the jealousy at all. The thrill of it, the newness, the intensity, was taking over, pushing aside everything else. I felt Sarah's hand slide up to my neck, pulling me closer, and before I knew it, her lips were on mine. The kiss was soft, but there was something electric about it, something heightened by everything that was happening around us. I could still feel Derek's presence right there beside us, and instead of pushing me away, it made everything more intense. When I pulled back, I glanced at Derek, who was watching me with a calm, almost curious expression. There was no awkwardness between us, no discomfort. He was just as much a part of this as I was, and for the first time, I didn't feel threatened by it. I didn't feel like I was being replaced. If anything, I felt more connected to Sarah than I had in a long time. "Jack," Sarah whispered, her voice soft, "are you okay?" I nodded, my heart still pounding. "Yeah," I murmured, surprised by how much I meant it. "I'm okay." Sarah smiled, her eyes filled with something like relief, and then she leaned in to kiss me again. But this time, her hands moved between the two of us, and I felt Derek's presence again, closer now, as he touched her too. We were all tangled up in this together, and instead of feeling like I was losing her, I felt like I was part of something bigger, something new. The lines between us blurred, who was touching whom, who was kissing whom, and it didn't matter anymore. It wasn't about ownership or jealousy. It was about sharing this experience, this raw, intense moment, and for the first time, I understood what Sarah had been talking about. This wasn't about taking something away from me. It was about adding something to us, something I had never imagined I could be part of. I didn't know how long it went on, minutes, hours. Time seemed to stop as the three of us moved together, exploring each other in ways I had never thought possible. There was something liberating about it, something that made me feel free in a way I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just watching anymore. I was part of it. And the more I let myself give in to that feeling, the more the jealousy faded into the background, replaced by a rush of excitement, of pleasure. Sarah kissed me again, and this time, her hands were on me, her body pressed against mine. I could still feel Derek there, still part of this strange, intimate dance we were sharing, but it didn't bother me anymore. It wasn't about who had what part of her. It was about being together, about letting go of everything that had been holding me back. And in that moment, I realized that I wasn't losing Sarah. I was finding her again, finding us again. It was strange, yes. But it was also exhilarating. And as the night went on, as the three of us moved together in ways I never thought possible, I understood why Sarah had wanted this. Why she had needed this. Because in the end, it wasn't about replacing me. It was about rediscovering something we had lost along the way. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid anymore. The next morning, I woke up with Sarah curled up beside me, her hand resting gently on my chest. Derek was gone, he had slipped out at some point during the night, leaving us alone again. But as I lay there, feeling the warmth of her body next to mine, I realized that things had changed. We had changed. It wasn't the ending I had imagined. But it wasn't the end, either.